You ever feel that pull? That strange curiosity to peek inside an abandoned house, or wander through a place you know you shouldn't? Most of us pass by with a quick glance, but some people give in to that temptation. They step across the "No Trespassing" sign, thinking it'll just be a harmless adventure. But here's the truth. These stories aren't about dusty floors or broken glass. They come from real people who went exploring and found things they were never meant to see. Because what they discovered wasn't just ruins. It was something far darker. There was one man who called himself a reclusive explorer. He didn't hang out with friends, didn't post much online. His thrill came from Google Earth, dropping into random spots and looking for places no one else had noticed. That's how he found it, a small, crumbling church in the middle of a woodland clearing, miles away from the nearest road. On a gray afternoon, he packed a flashlight and went out alone. The path was almost invisible, swallowed by weeds and thorn bushes. When the trees finally parted, there it stood, walls sagging, windows shattered, like the forest had been eating it alive. But what froze him was the well, just a few feet from the church door. It wasn't sealed, just a ring of stone sinking into blackness. And from inside came a slow, deliberate click, click, click. He stepped past it and pushed into the church. Pews were rotting in place, stained glass shattered like teeth, moss crawling up what was once an altar. Dust swallowed the air. Then he noticed stairs, leading down. Against his better judgment, he descended. At the bottom was a crude, hand-dug tunnel, damp walls dripping, echoing that same clicking. He thought he was alone, until he heard it. A voice, low and raspy, whispering his name. The clicking grew louder, faster. Terrified, he bolted up the stairs, out through the weeds, running until the forest swallowed everything behind him. Only then did the sound stop. He swears, even today, he can still hear faint clicking when he closes his eyes at night. You'd think after hearing about that church, nothing could top it. But trespassing horror doesn't always involve crumbling buildings or strange voices. Sometimes, what people stumble into looks normal at first, until it doesn't. And just when you think it can't get worse, imagine finding luxury cars hidden on private farmland. That's exactly what three friends did. They weren't ghost hunters or paranormal chasers, just bored teenagers looking for something to do on a late summer night. They had heard rumors that a massive property out on the edge of town hid more than just crops and barns. At first, it was just laughter and dares. They slipped through the barbed wire fence, crunching across dry grass, making their way toward the silhouette of a giant barn. But when one of them slid the door open, the mood shifted instantly. Inside sat rows of cars, their paint gleaming even in the dark. Expensive models, foreign imports, vehicles worth more than anything the boys had ever seen. And tucked at the far end, a camper trailer with no lights on, yet something about it felt wrong. That's when the smell hit them. Heavy, sour, like rotting meat carried on the breeze. One of the boys gagged, but before they could even speak, a noise came from the camper. A shuffle. Then a faint scrape against metal. The barn that once felt like a jackpot suddenly felt like a trap. And as they turned to leave, they realized they weren't alone. The three friends thought it was going to be a night full of laughs. They weren't ghost hunters, just bored teens, cracking jokes as they slipped past the old fence into a massive stretch of farmland. The place looked endless, just flat fields and a few dark shapes of barns scattered in the distance. At first, it was fun. They dared each other to run ahead, whispering like they were in some secret mission. But when they reached the biggest barn and slid the heavy door open, the jokes stopped. Inside were cars. Not beat-up trucks or tractors, luxury cars. Shiny black sedans, sports cars, even foreign models they only recognized from video games. All of them parked neatly, side by side, as if on display. At the far end of the barn sat an old camper. No lights. No sound. Yet the air around it felt heavy. That's when one of them noticed the smell, thick, sour, the unmistakable stench of something rotting. And worse, buzzing flies circled the corners of the camper. They were about to turn back when they froze. Something moved inside. Just a shift of shadow, but it was enough. Then, as they squinted, they realized a man was standing at the doorway of the camper. Tall, thin, and wrong. His face wasn't blurred by shadow, it was featureless. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. just smooth, pale skin. Before the boys could scream, a woman's voice echoed across the barn. But it wasn't natural, it was garbled, distorted, like a broken recording. "Don't leave!" she shrieked, before sprinting toward them, her footsteps pounding. The boys ran. They tore through the fields, branches cutting their skin, adrenaline surging. Behind them, the heavy crunch of footsteps followed, closing in, then suddenly, fading, swallowed by the night. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of the road, gasping, trembling, too scared to even speak. To this day, none of them can explain what they saw, or why those cars were there. You've heard about the clicking well. You've heard about the faceless man. But here's the thing. Sometimes, it isn't monsters or strangers you should fear at all. Sometimes, it's the property owner themselves. Because when you trespass onto the wrong land, you might not find ghosts, or even secrets. You might find someone waiting, armed, angry, and willing to do anything to keep you off their property. And that's exactly what happened on a hot Texas night, at a quarry where a group of teens thought they were safe. On the outskirts of a small Texas town, there's a quarry locals whisper about. Deep blue water, steep cliffs, and no security cameras. For teens, it was the perfect late-night hangout, illegal, but thrilling. One summer night, a group of friends snuck past the private property signs, laughing as they stripped down and jumped from the ledges into the cool water below. The quarry echoed with splashes and cheers. For a while, it felt like freedom. But then, they heard it. A low rumble. Gravel crunching under heavy tires. Headlights suddenly cut through the darkness, sweeping across the jagged cliffs. A pickup truck was crawling along the ridge above them. The laughter died instantly. A man's voice boomed out, furious, demanding to know what they were doing on his land. Before anyone could answer, a gunshot cracked the night. The bullet slammed into the water, spraying mist where one of the boys had just been swimming. They thought it was a warning. Until the second shot. Then the third. Each one closer than the last. He wasn't just scaring them. He was aiming. Panic erupted. The teens scrambled out of the water, feet tearing open on sharp rocks, slipping and stumbling as more shots echoed across the quarry. The man shouted threats, chasing them with his truck's headlights blazing down like search beams. Barefoot, bleeding, and gasping for air, they ran until the ground turned to pavement. The glowing lines of the highway never looked so safe. They didn't stop until cars passed, shielding them in the presence of strangers. They made it out alive. But the landowner? He never faced charges. The quarry story proves one thing. Trespassing can get you killed by people just as easily as by anything paranormal. But not every encounter ends with gunshots. Sometimes, it's the silence that's worse. Because when you step into an abandoned place at night, you don't always see what's following you. You only hear it. A creak. A whisper. Footsteps on the floor above you, when you know you're the only one inside. And for two cousins exploring a lakeside mansion, that silence quickly became something else, something they can't explain, even years later. On the edge of a forgotten lake sat a mansion that looked like it had once belonged to royalty. Time had stripped it down, paint peeled from the walls, vines crawled through cracked windows, but it still carried the weight of something grand. Two cousins decided to explore it one summer evening. They slipped through a broken door and found themselves inside a home that felt frozen in time. A grand piano stood in the corner, half its keys missing but still humming faintly when touched. Family photos lined the mantel, their faces faded, but their eyes still sharp, watching. At first, it was just fascination. Dusty chandeliers, a dining table still set as if waiting for guests who never came. But then they heard it. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming from upstairs. They froze. Maybe squatters, they thought. Maybe someone else had claimed this place. But when they whispered, "Hello," no answer came. Then the whispers started. Low voices, drifting through the halls, impossible to place. A door upstairs creaked slowly open, though no one was visible. The air grew colder, heavier. They turned to leave, trying not to panic, when it happened. Footsteps. This time, not above them. Not in another room. Directly behind them. The cousins spun around. Nothing. Just empty air. That was enough. They sprinted out, crashing through weeds and broken boards until the lake swallowed the house behind them. Neither of them ever went back. And neither can shake the memory of footsteps that came from someone, or something, that wasn't there. Trespassing might sound like harmless fun, a late-night thrill or a story to brag about. But these 4 tales prove the danger is real, whether it's strangers hiding secrets, voices in the dark, or someone willing to pull the trigger. So tell me, which would you rather face, an armed man, a faceless stranger, or something you can't even see?